Oh, oh, hello. I didn't see you there. Oh, so you've been looking to build and deploy an iOS application from Windows using .NET MAUI? Well, I got you covered. Whether you have a Mac or you don't, there are multiple ways to deploy and build iOS applications directly from Windows all over your network or directly to your iOS device. And today, I'm going to break down every single thing that you need to know. So tune in. Hey everyone, I'm James, and I'm back today to talk about a problem that I've sort of skimmed over a little bit in some of my earlier videos, which is how do you actually build and deploy an iOS application using .NET MAUI, to a device or to a simulator if you're on a Windows machine. And maybe you don't even have a Mac. How do you do that development process? Well, if you watch any of my getting started or the tutorials, you saw that I talked about a few different pieces of technology that either enable you to connect to a Mac or directly plug in your iOS device into Windows. And I'm going to break down those two different ways of building and deploying iOS applications today. Now, the first one is a tried, trusted, and true method of building iOS applications from Windows, which is pairing directly to a Mac on your network, such as my MacBook Air right here. Now, what this enables you to do is to do a remote build and remote deployment, and the iOS simulator will show up either on your Mac or you have the remoted iOS simulator to show it up on your Windows device as well, which is actually really, really cool. So let's go ahead and take a look at how to get this set up automatically from Windows and Visual Studio 2022. All right, the first thing that we need to do is have our project open. Here I am, I'm just inside of a brand new .NET MAUI application, and there's a few ways to get the pairing working. The first one I always go to is just this little pair to Mac button, but you can also do iOS over here, pair to Mac. It's a little bit off screen, but it's definitely there, trust me. When you tap on that, it's going to bring up this little dialog. Now, if it's your very first time, you're gonna see this how to pair to your Mac instruction guide. Now, what this will show you is that you need to go over to your Mac and you need to enable remote login. This is essentially going to enable your Windows machine to connect to your Mac over SSH. You turn on remote login, you give it the specific usernames that you want, and you're off to the races. Now, inside of this pair to Mac screen, this is either hopefully going to find your Mac automatically like it has here, my MacBook Air with my IP address. And that's using the Bonjour service. So you might see a bunch of odd things inside of there, hopefully just your Macs, but maybe some other Apple devices or non-Apple devices sometimes are just broadcasting there, which is cool. Or you can go ahead and say add Mac, and then you can go ahead and add the IP address manually. So I'm just going to go ahead and double tap on this Mac. It's going to connect via SSH. I'm just going to go ahead and enter my username and password. Now this is the username and password of my Mac. So when I went over to my Mac and I had remote login plugged in, then it was all set up. Now this is the same process that works specifically back in the Xamarin days. So when you're doing Xamarin iOS or Xamarin Forms development, this is the exact same thing. Essentially what's going to happen here is going to go and it's going to check to make sure you have the right version of the .NET SDK installed, the right versions of the iOS SDK, and everything that you want. So here we can see that it's actually installing the .NET SDK, and it's going to do a bunch of other stuff. So let's give it a few seconds here to get through doing this, because if you have the same build and the same version, it's going to be pretty quick. But if you have different versions, it's going to install a bunch of stuff. So we'll give it a few seconds here. All right, we're totally all connected. We see that little chain link there. That means we're totally good to go. And we can see up here that it's paired to my Mac and it has a little green icon here. All right, now all we need to do is simply select our iOS device. There's a few ways of doing this. Let me just make this a little bit smaller here. So from our drop down, we're gonna see that there are three options. Local device, talk about that in a second. Remote devices. Remote device is if you have an iOS device set up on your Mac. So it's actually plugged into your Mac. It's a remote device. You can also set it up inside of Xcode to be a wireless device. So you could actually just have this basically wireless to your Mac and then deployed wirelessly here, which is kind of cool. You can see my Apple TV, I think, is set up there. Then there's the iOS simulators. So as long as you have the correct versions of Xcode installed and everything's up and running, you're going to have your iOS simulators there. You do need, of course, Xcode installed on your Mac, just as you would expect, alongside your Visual Studio for Mac as well. And this is going to have all the different devices here. So let's pick one like the iPhone SE 3rd Gen. I'm just going to go ahead and snap this here, and I'm going to hit run. What this is going to do now is compile up my application, and then it's going to go ahead and deploy it to a remoted iOS simulator. Now, there are two options, remoted iOS simulator or just a normal iOS simulator. When you go to Tools Options, you're going to see here under Xamarin iOS settings, yeah, it's still under Xamarin because it shares the settings with the Xamarin iOS. Here we can see that you can pair to Mac, which is the same screen, enable auto connections to known Mac. So if you want it every single time you open it up, you're good to go. Down here, you're going to have the remote iOS simulator checkbox. And then this is pretty important. This is where you can update your version of Xcode. I use an app called Xcodes, which I've done a video on. I'll put it up over there to manage multiple versions of Xcode. And here I'm running 14.1, for example. So this is going to go ahead and compile up my code. Basically what it's doing is a remote compilation of all my source code, and it's going to compile it up into an executable to be deployed onto the iOS simulator. So let's give it a few seconds here, and we'll be off to the races. All right, we are deploying now, and now we have this little iOS simulator here, which again is basically going to start up an iOS simulator on my Mac, which is kind of bananas. And then it's going to go ahead and display it here on my Windows machine. And this is kind of bananas because if you do have a touch screen, it's going to actually have all your touch screen stuff like that. There are different settings here for screenshots, rotation, gesture shake, and a bunch more. But there it is. There's like literally an iOS device on my Windows machine. I don't know, how cool is that? That's pretty bananas in my opinion. And you can scale to fit. You can do a bunch of other things like that. And of course you get full debug support as well. So it's going to use your XAML hot reload, reload, all those other things as well. And of course, this is just the default application. So it's just going to have the button clickers down here for me. So again, it's going to go ahead and load up all the assemblies for the first time. It's happening on my Mac. So it does take a few seconds here as it loads everything up. And then we'll actually see it in real time, which is great. XAML hot reloading, initializing. So cool. And then boom, there it is. And I can click, click, click. I can, of course, come into my Solution Explorer, go into my main page. I do get my XAML Live preview up and running, which is very, very cool. I can add breakpoints over here, and then I can go ahead and tap on that breakpoint. I can inspect variables, everything that I would expect I could do, right? I mean, that's what you would sort of expect for it to be doing. And now we have our iOS application running here. And again, inside of the XAML Live preview as well, which is super duper cool. All right, now that is the first way and sort of the tried, true, and tested way, like I said earlier, of doing it because you're doing that full compilation. So this is nice if, for example, you have a lot of dependencies that are using native libraries, you need access to a full compilation. Maybe you're using HealthKit or something else like that that needs different entitlements. You're going to need to go through that full process of connecting up and going off to your Mac and doing those things like that. But what if you're just getting started, or what if you're like me and a lot of my applications aren't that crazy complicated? I'm not using tons and tons of native underlying hood, libraries that need to be compiled. What if you just want to not have your Mac and you want to, I don't know, put it on your iPhone? You just have an iPhone, iPad, iPod Touch, if you still have one, sitting around. Probably a newer iPhone or newer iPad would be ideal. What if you just want to take this and then deploy it over into from your Windows machine? Well, you can do that. Let's take a look. Before we go any further, I have to tell you about our partner this week, Skillshare. Now, you may know Skillshare for their classes on photography, film, illustration, and more, but did you know that they have hundreds of career-focused classes too? And now is really the perfect time to reinvent your goals and yourself and explore your passions. Now, let me tell you a few ways I've been personally utilizing Skillshare ever since I joined. First is actually a class from MKBHD on content creation and YouTube success that I've been applying to this channel and other content that I do. Now, personally, if you're like me, you may have a lot going on, but that doesn't mean that you can't take more time for things that fulfill you. And personally, I've loved the classes around productivity and time management. Ali Abdal has a delightful masterclass on productivity that showed me the best habits and tools to help boost productivity. And he also has a class that blew my mind on how to actually use Notion, which is something I've always wanted to use to help organize my life. There is something for everyone on Skillshare with endless opportunities to learn how to design a career that fits you. And I'm really excited to partner with them to give away a free 1-month trial to the first 1,000 people that use the link in my description below. That's right, the first 1,000 people will get 1 month free trial to Skillshare. All you have to do is use the link below in the description. And thanks to Skillshare for partnering with me for this video. All right, so this piece of technology is called iOS Hot Restart. Again, this is under Tools Options under the iOS settings. And down here is the Hot Restart. It's not my favorite name, but basically what it does is it uses the interpreter to be able to run your app inside of an app shell, basically, that can be deployed onto your device, which is nice from your Windows machine with no Mac at all. Now, there is some guides and documentation here. The one caveat here is that you need to have a 64-bit local iOS device, VS 2022. You do not need to pair to a Mac build host. In fact, I'll disconnect just to prove it to you. And the other thing here is you're going to need to install iTunes from the Microsoft Store or the 64-bit version on your machine. And you need to have an Apple developer account and be enrolled in the paid Apple developer program. Whew, that is a lot of requirements. But if you have all of these things, you're totally good to go. Now, the reason for this is because iOS to deploy to devices requires Apple developer accounts, certs, and certificates, and all these things. So that's how you're going to need to actually be able to get it onto your device here, which is really, really cool. All right, so once we're good, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect from my Mac. So there we go. And now we can see that I have no simulators, nothing on here at all. And again, no local devices. So what I'm going to do is take my iOS device and I've plugged it in. I'm going to plug it into my machine. There we go. Now, you might need to go ahead and make sure if you get a pop-up that says, hey, do you trust this device? Make sure you trust it. Again, make sure you have all those dependencies installed and everything like that. And once you have that, you should see under the iOS local devices, your device. And here is my iPhone 11 Pro. So I'm going to tap on that. And again, that's under the local devices because it's local to this machine. All right, now that I have my iOS device selected, all I need to do is hit debug. Now, if this is my very first time building and deploying this project, I'm going to get this little pop-up here, which is setting up Hot Restart. Now, if I don't have iTunes installed and I don't have my Apple developer account installed, then I'm going to walk through that process here, but I already have it, which is nice. So all I need to do is come in and select my team. Now, I'm going to show you how you set this all up, and the documentation is great. What you'll do is create an API key in the Apple Developer Portal and plug it into Visual Studio. I'm going to select my team. This is going to go through, make sure all the provisioning profiles, everything is synchronized and good to go, and I can hit finish. All right, and just like that, we can see now it's deploying the application to my device. Now it's going to pop up this little message here that says for the first time I need to actually click on it, which I'm going to click here. We can see the .NET MAUI application opening and launching from my device directly from Visual Studio, directly wired through USB to my desktop here. And of course, I can be any Windows machine, such as my Surface laptop over here, which I use all the time on the road. And now we have our Hello World over here, and boom, just like that, we actually have it showing up inside of Visual Studio in that XAML Live preview as well. So I can click that, I can get my XAML Hot Reload, I can get my C# Hot Reload, all that goodness that I would expect, which is pretty amazing. All right, we did it. Now there is quite a lot in there. Now I've gone through the hoops. Sometimes you have to revoke different provisioning profile certificates. You've been doing this for a while. Might get some error messages in your setup, but if you're coming in fresh and you're setting up these accounts for the first time, you're gonna be good to go. As these things sort of progress, the setup's gotten easier and there's all sorts of good stuff. In fact, I wanna show you really quick the guide over here. So the guide walks you through this process. So notice here, there's more steps like iTunes, Hot Restart, all this other stuff. And this will actually walk you through signing in with an enterprise or individual account. So here you set up your auth key, your P8 key, all this stuff, and it shows you how to create it inside of the App Store Connect as well. So all sorts of good stuff there. So really, really easy to do. It looks a little bit, complicated, but in general, it's a nice walkthrough for everything that you need. Like I said, if you've been doing this for a while and you have some old certs sitting around, make sure you clear it out. Make sure you read any error messages that may come up. But for me, it's been a relatively smooth process using these new API keys, getting everything up and running. Now, a few caveats of hot restart. You may notice that by default, if you change your app icon, the app icon is still the .NET icon. You're like, oh, that's weird. Same with the splash screen. Well, that's because it's running your source code inside of an app shell, right? So it's not your actual app deployed, it's an app inside of an app. So it's really only for development purposes. When you want to go off and actually build and compile and deploy your application to the App Store, then you're going to need a Mac or a cloud host solution or something like that. Now, if you don't have a Mac sitting around, there are some options, obviously like GitHub Actions, Azure DevOps, App Center, Bitrise, all these different cloud CI services. But there is actually Mac in Cloud, which lets you rent out a Mac in the cloud, basically. It's been around forever, and it has like Visual Studio for Mac and all that stuff set up as well. So there's lots of options there, which is really, really neat. But I kind of wanted to walk through these different things, whether you pair to your Mac, get everything up and running, get iOS hot restart running, all those things. Let me know what you think if you've got everything up and running and deploying onto your devices or onto a remoted iOS simulator. Let me know what your setup's like in the comments below, and other things that you might want to see from videos here on these different setups and guides so you can be super successful building .NET MAUI applications. If you made it this far in the video, you are the best. And I'd love it if you could hit that like button down there and subscribe as well, so you stay up to date with all the videos that I'm putting here on my channel. That's going to do it for this video. Until next time, thank you so much. Have a good one.